American White History Month fans, and any leftist who might secretly be watching me have the guilty pleasure that it brings. I may convert you yet. Okay, I'm going to try to talk really fast because I know most people have an attention span no longer than 5 minutes. I am sure most of you have heard about the highly controversial article by Robert Hubert in the Philadelphia Magazine titled Being White in Philly. The author spoke to many white people in the city and recorded their observations along with his own observations about race relations. It wasn't a news story so much as it was a human interest piece. And the leftists in the media and the blogosphere had epileptic fits. How dare anyone present the points of view of average white people? The only real conversation about race permitted in Obama's America is that which blames white people for the black community's problems. Otherwise, you're just a racist. For example, Daniel Denver for Philadelphia City Paper wrote, quote, "I must first disable the story's booby trap, a defense built into its very DNA, the idea that, in so many quarters, simply discussing race is seen as racist." End quote. What planet do you live on, Mr. Denver? Unless a white person spouts the leftist doctrine when talking about race, they are labeled a racist. The doctrine consists of 4 basic parts. Number 1, white people have white privilege and they must feel guilty about it and make it up to minorities. Number 2, white people are subconsciously racist. Number 3, blacks still suffer from widespread discrimination by whites today. And number 4, the black community's problems are caused both indirectly and directly by that discrimination. If those statements are not coming out of your mouth in one way, shape, or form when you plan on talking about being white, then you're a racist. This is psychological warfare, white people, and the left wages it every day. Daniel Denver, anti-white wuss that he is, continues, and I quote, "Hubert is not a brave man, and his premise is totally false. People will only think you simply discussing race is racist if you, like Hubert, treat black people like inscrutable extraterrestrials whose moral shortcomings might be responsible for their own poverty. The reality is that many black people frequently talk about race and racism, and really, white people do too, sometimes intelligently, sometimes not so much. To the extent that whites do not discuss race more, it is because they do not want to address important pieces of context, like, say, history." End quote. Okay. Did you see what he did there? Mr. Denver, that propaganda machine masquerading as a journalist, did 2 things. Number 1, if I think that the moral shortcomings of black people are the cause of their bad behavior and problems, then that means I think that black people are inscrutable extraterrestrials. In other words, if you don't blame the poverty and criminality that plagues the black community on discrimination by white people, then you are a racist. And number 2, Mr. Denver is basically accusing white people of refusing to talk about race because they don't want to talk about history, presumably the history of slavery, race-based discrimination, and Jim Crow laws. As if we haven't been hearing about that since elementary school. As if we haven't talked to death about the past sins of a minority of white people and done everything in our collective power to rectify those sins, short of literally putting ourselves into chains. That dead horse has been beaten past the point of recognition. Moving on to another disapproving leftist journalist. Oxymoron, I know. Jason Fagoni of the Philly Post couldn't believe that Hubert would only write about race relations from the viewpoints of white people. Didn't Hubert know that white people cannot have viewpoints publicly acknowledged without providing counterpoints from minorities? Fagoni wrote, "The way I see it, the story is doomed before Bob has a chance to write a single sentence. The framing is that this is a story about, quote, being white. It's going to explore race from a single point of view. No black people will be quoted, no Hispanic people, no Asian people, and they're not. This seems fatal to me. All Bob can accomplish within the frame of being white is exactly what he does accomplish, which is to chronicle the racial fears of one particular group of people, moving among his sources as a kind of confessor. End quote. You see, no self-respecting journalist would ever write about being white. It is an invalid state of being, not even worthy of being acknowledged. Now, you evil, racist white people, go sit down and shut the hell up.